Thanks for all the support, everyone. It honestly means so much to me. Here we have 3 scary stories about flatmates. Are any of you out there flatmates? Have you any stories to tell? Please tell us in the comments section.
It was the middle of summer and I had just moved to a new city. I was eager to find a flatmate to help split the rent and keep me company. I posted an ad online and soon enough, I received a message from a woman named Sarah. We agreed to meet up and she seemed like the perfect flatmate. She was friendly, easygoing, and had a good job. We quickly agreed to share the apartment and moved in a few days later. Things started off well enough. Sarah was tidy and considerate, and we enjoyed chatting over dinner. But as the days went by, I started to notice strange things happening. I would come home from work and find the furniture moved or my belongings out of place. I would hear strange noises coming from Sarah's room at night, and sometimes she would be awake and pacing when I went to bed. One evening, I was watching TV when Sarah burst into the living room. Her eyes were wide with terror and she was shaking. She told me that she had heard strange voices in her room, and that something was trying to communicate with her. I tried to calm her down, but the fear in her voice was contagious and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next day, Sarah didn't show up for work. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. I decided to check on her and knocked on her bedroom door. There was no response, so I slowly opened the door. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. Sarah was lying on the bed, her eyes open and staring at the ceiling. Her body was covered in scratches and bruises, and there was a look of terror frozen on her face. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that something unspeakable had happened. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from the closet. It sounded like someone or something was moving around inside. Without thinking, I slowly approached the closet and cautiously opened the door. What I saw inside was unlike anything I had ever seen before. A creature with pale, bony fingers and sunken eyes stared back at me, its body hunched over and twitching with every movement. Its breath smelled like death and decay, and I could feel my stomach turn as the stench filled the room. As I backed away in terror, the creature lunged at me with surprising speed. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest, and managed to slam the closet door shut just in time. I knew then that I had to leave the apartment immediately. I called the police and they arrived shortly after. They searched the apartment but found no trace of the creature or any evidence of what had happened to Sarah. The investigation continued for several weeks, but no one could explain what had happened in that apartment. Some people speculated that Sarah had become possessed by a malevolent entity that had ultimately consumed her, while others believed that the creature in the closet was a manifestation of the evil that had taken root in that place. To this day, I still don't know what really happened in that apartment. But I know one thing for certain: I will never forget the shock and terror that I felt when I came face to face with that creature. And I will always be haunted by the memory of Sarah's terrified face and the inexplicable events that occurred during our brief time as flatmates.
I had just moved to a new city in the state of New York and needed a place to live. Scouring the classified ads, I stumbled upon an ad that seemed too good to be true. A spacious apartment in a great location, all for a very reasonable price. I jumped at the opportunity and arranged to meet the current tenant, a man named David, to check out the place. The apartment was everything I had hoped for and more. It was spacious, well furnished, and in a prime location. David seemed like a nice guy too, friendly and helpful. I signed the lease on the spot and moved in a few days later. The first few weeks were great. I settled into my new home, explored the city, and made new friends. But then things started to get weird. It started with little things, like finding my things moved around, or hearing strange noises in the middle of the night. But then it got worse. One night, I woke up to find David standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. I screamed and he quickly left the room, claiming he had sleepwalked. I didn't believe him, but I tried to put it out of my mind. But then it happened again. And again. David would show up in my room in the middle of the night, always claiming he had no memory of it. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Was I imagining things? Was David playing some kind of sick joke on me? And then one day, I found something that made my blood run cold. I was looking for some spare change when I stumbled upon a box hidden in the back of a closet. Inside, I found a collection of newspaper clippings and photographs, all of them relating to a series of unsolved murders that had taken place in the city several years ago. And there, among the clippings, was a picture of David. I didn't know what to do. I was living with a killer. Every night, I lay awake, listening for the sound of his footsteps, waiting for him to come into my room again. I was trapped, alone and afraid. And then, one night, I woke up to the sound of a door slamming shut. I got out of bed and cautiously made my way to the living room, where I found David standing in front of the open front door, a look of panic on his face. "They're coming for me," he whispered. "They know what I did." And then he was gone, disappearing into the night without another word. I never saw him again, but I knew that he was out there, somewhere, still on the run from the law. And I couldn't help but wonder, was he really the only one responsible for those murders, or had he had a little help from his previous flatmates? I couldn't stay in that apartment after that night. I packed my bags and left without looking back, still haunted by the realization that I had been living with a killer. For weeks afterwards, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, following me wherever I went. Every time I heard footsteps behind me or saw a shadow in the corner of my eye, my heart would race and my palms would sweat. Eventually, I decided to do some research on the murders that David had been connected to. I read every article, every police report, every interview with the victims' families. And as I delved deeper into the case, I began to realize that there was more to it than I had initially thought. There were too many coincidences, too many unanswered questions. Why had David been so eager to rent out his apartment to a stranger? Why had he been so insistent on having a roommate, despite the fact that he could have easily afforded the rent on his own? And most importantly, why had he kept those newspaper clippings and photographs hidden away in a box? As I dug deeper, I began to uncover a dark and twisted web of secrets and lies, stretching back years into the past. It seemed that David had not acted alone in the murders. There had been others, people who had helped him cover his tracks, who had stayed silent out of fear or loyalty or some other twisted motive. I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let the killers get away with it. So I contacted the police, and over the course of several months, I provided them with all the information I had gathered. It wasn't easy. There were threats, intimidation, attempts to silence me. But I persevered, and in the end, justice was served. The other perpetrators were caught and brought to trial, and David was finally held accountable for his crimes. It was a long and difficult journey, but in the end, I knew that I had done the right thing. And as I looked back on my time in that haunting apartment, I couldn't help but wonder, what other secrets were hiding in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered?
I hope you enjoy the content I upload. If you like what I'm doing, why not think about clicking on the subscribe button to keep up to date on my uploads. Thank you all for the great support.
As soon as the strange man answered my flatmate ad, I knew there was something off about him. He had a nervous energy, and his smile was forced, as if he was hiding something. But I needed a flatmate, and he seemed eager to move in. He introduced himself as Mark, a quiet and unassuming man in his mid-30s. He had no family or friends in the area and worked a desk job for a tech company. I didn't think much of it and agreed to show him around the apartment. At first, everything seemed fine. He paid his rent on time, kept to himself, and didn't make much noise. But as the weeks went by, I began to notice strange things happening around the apartment. He would come home late at night, and I could hear him moving around in his room for hours. Sometimes, I would hear him talking to himself, as if having a heated argument. Other times, I would find strange objects lying around the apartment, objects that seemed to have no place in a normal person's life. I tried to confront him about it, but he always had an excuse. He would tell me he was just stressed from work, or that he was working on a project that required strange objects. But I knew there was more to it than that. One night, I woke up to the sound of screaming. It was coming from his room. I rushed in, only to find him curled up in a ball on the floor, crying and screaming incoherently. I tried to help him, but he just pushed me away and ran out of the apartment. I didn't see him for days after that, and when he finally did come back, he seemed different. Darker, somehow. He had lost weight, had bags under his eyes, and he had stopped showering. He would sit in his room all day and only come out to use the bathroom or get food. It was as if he was haunted by something, and it was taking a toll on him. I started to do some research on him, and what I found was horrifying. He had a history of violence, of lashing out at people who had wronged him. He had been in and out of jail for years, and had only just been released before answering my ad. I knew then that I had to get out of there. But instead of running, I decided to confront him one last time. I sat him down and talked to him, tried to get him to open up about what was going on. At first, he was resistant, defensive. But as I continued to talk to him, he began to open up. He told me about his troubled past, about the things he had done and the things that had been done to him. It was a harrowing tale. He had been abused as a child, bullied in school, and had turned to drugs and alcohol to cope. He had been in and out of jail for years, and had finally decided to turn his life around when he got out. But the ghosts of his past had caught up with him, and he couldn't shake them. He was afraid of losing control again, of hurting someone else. And so he had retreated into himself, shutting out the world and living in constant fear. In the end, we were able to come to an understanding. He agreed to seek help, to get the counseling he needed to deal with his past traumas. And I agreed to stand by him, to help him through the process. It wasn't an easy road, but together we were able to overcome the darkness that had been haunting us both. In the end, we both emerged stronger, more whole, than we had ever been before.